You understand? It does not matter. This is what I'm trying to explain. Winston Churchill himself called communism a Jewish plot and enthusiastically expressed his support for the Nazis during the 1920s and 30s in their struggle against communism. Anyway. Jews and communists were both blamed for having allegedly betrayed Germany during World War I and resulting in Germany signing the Treaty of Versailles in what is known as the stab in the back myth. In Poland, before World War II, Zdokumuna was used in the same way to allege that Jews were conspiring with the Soviet Union to invade Poland. According to Andre Geritz, the myth of Jewish communism was one of the most popular and widespread political prejudices in the first half of the 20th century, in Eastern Europe in particular. The allegation still sees use in anti-Semitic publications and websites today. Also, that allegation is literally a formative one in the modern Republican Party. The world of Pfizer are Jews. The whole of Pfizer are Jews. Genocide vax. Yes, dude. Yes. The Jewish doctors and the executives that are engaging in mass inoculation campaigns are actually doing it to genocide everyone. You're right. You got that. You're hitting the double Monty. Where are these fucking chatters coming from, dude? Anyway. I don't get it. Is summer break? The kiddos are out. Major General Ulysses S. Grant was influenced by such sentiments during the American Civil War, expelling Jews from areas under his control in western Tennessee. The Jews, as a class violating every regulation of trade establishment by the Treasury Department and also department orders, are hereby expelled within 24 hours from the receipt of his order. That order was quickly rescinded by Abraham Lincoln, but it was already enforced in a number of towns. Also, being an open communist is literally illegal in Poland and can get you a 3-year sentence. Still, like what? Yes. Poland is still operating on some very weird and unique boundaries, okay? And therefore, they never get to see the top of the hour ad break, which comes at the top of every hour and is 3 minutes long. They don't get to see it, though, because they don't really have a lot of computers over there. Now, we looked at a lot of the fascists and their opinion on Judeo-Bolshevism, and we looked at a lot of the American leaders and drew comparisons as to what, like, you know, modern American leaders think about Judaism, stuff like that. So let's hear from, because a lot of people will also nowadays say, like, communists are anti-Semitic or whatever. So let's hear from one of the godfathers of real existing communist revolution, socialist revolution, a bald man by the name of Lenin. Let's hear what he had to say about anti-Semitism.
Антисемитизмом называется распространение вражды к евреям. Когда
Hold on, let me just start it here. Anti-Semitism means spreading enmity towards the Jews. When the accursed Tsarist monarchy was living its last day, it tried to incite ignorant workers and peasants against the Jews. The Tsarist police, in alliance with the landowners and the capitalists, organized pogroms against the Jews. In other countries, too, we often see the capitalists fomenting hatred against the Jews in order to blind the workers, to divert their attention from the real enemy of the working people, capital. Hatred towards the Jews persists only in those countries where slavery to the landowners and capitalists has created abysmal ignorance among the workers and peasants. Only the most ignorant and downtrodden people can believe the lies and slander that are spread about the Jews. This is a survival of ancient feudal times, when the priests burned heretics at the stake, when the peasants lived in slavery, and when the people were crushed and inarticulate. This ancient feudal ignorance is passing away. The eyes of the people are being opened. It is not the Jews who are the enemies of the working people. The enemies of the workers are the capitalists of all countries. Among the Jews, there are working people, and they form the majority. They are our brothers who, like us, are oppressed by capital. They are our comrades in the struggle for socialism. Remember, his number one what is it called when you have like a male buddy that you send letters to? Pen pal. Yeah, his number one pen pal was Rosa Luxemburg. So, you know. Among the Jews, there are kulaks, exploiters and capitalists, just like there are among the Russians and among people of all nations. The capitalists strive to sow and foment hatred between workers of different faiths, different nations, and different races. Those who do not work are kept in power by the power and strength of capital. Rich Jews, like rich Russians, and the rich in all countries are in alliance to oppress, crush, and rob and disunite the workers. Shame on accursed Tsarism, which tortured and persecuted the Jews. Shame on those who foment hatred towards the Jews, who foment hatred towards other nations. Long live the fraternal trust and fighting alliance of the workers of all nations in the struggle to overthrow capital. Literally anyone who compares Bolshevik anti-Semitism, which did exist and was largely inherited from the Russian Empire, is a fool. The USSR anti-Semitism was nothing compared to Tsarist and the massive pogroms that brutally massacred Jewish population throughout the Russian Empire, and even many white emigre supported the Nazis against the USSR. Yeah, the Tsarist anti-Semitism is, like, I would say, foundational in. I mean, dude, they wrote the fucking protocols, dude. That's it. Like, this literally is the most significant anti-Semitic text. Okay? Everything that you think about in terms of, like, everything that you've learned about anti-Semitism literally stems from this. An anti-Semitic text purported to describe a Jewish plan to achieve global domination and to document the minutes of a late 19th century meeting attended by world Jewish leaders, the elders of Zion, conspiring to take over the world. The fraudulent protocols included plans to subvert the morals of the non-Jewish world, to control the world's economies by Jewish bankers, to have press and Jewish control of the press, and ultimately destroy civilization. The document of 24 protocols was analyzed by Stephen Jacobs and Mark Weitzman, who documented several protocols that suggested that Jews would employ control over the world's banking system to dominate the world. It is the Brothers Grimm of anti-Semitism, yes. Like, it is where all... I mean, dude, right there, like, that right there is straight up. And it was, like, mass delivered to any fascist who would listen. Except for in Japan, where the Japanese that got a copy of it were like, oh my God, these are magic These are magic money people. We have to use their power for ourselves. We should put them in Manchuria, which is the funniest World War II fact, in my opinion. They could not understand why you would, jail these magic money people, and were like, give them to us, please. Yeah, that Lenin speech at the same time in the U.S., Henry Ford's paper, here it is, was running excerpts from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Is that actually real? Yes. Japanese philo-Semitism is a very funny part of history that I was not privy to until recently. But yes, there's actually a lot of not just Japanese, but like Asian philo-Semitism in general, where like apparently the Talmud is like a very popular book in Korea, in South Korea. And in China as well, where they also still like kind of think Jews are magic money people, and that the Talmud will give them like good luck in finance. It's philo, not philo. Okay, philo-Semitism. I looked into the Talmud claim about Korea, but couldn't find anything that indicated it was a popular children's book. We read it in an article. It was I don't know, I forget which newspaper wrote about it, but we read a couple different articles actually that said that like my Chinese relatives all think Jewish people are good luck and very good at making money. Yeah. Hassan, why do you know so much about anti-Semitism? Because I am an anti-fascist. Because I'm an anti-capitalist. And capitalists and fascists, which are two peas in a pod, are actually historically and in contemporary society very anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is seen as a canary in the coal mine for that reason. Anti-Semitism, and not like in the ADL Apartheid Defense League's definition of anti-Semitism, but like actual anti-Semitism, the notion that like Jews are monolithic in their understanding of the world and control the money supply and the media and use it to degenerate Western civilization. That kind of anti-Semitism oftentimes is a clear-cut indication that someone is most likely operating on fascist principles. This is also part of the reason why I extra mad about all of the bastardization of this like very serious charge, a charge of anti-Semitism, done by, in some instances, Jewish people that are cynically weaponizing it, like with StopAntisemitism.org or ADL and many other defenders of Israel. It's ridiculous. It's fucked up. It dilutes real anti-Semitism while also creating an environment that is perfect for fascists to exploit. Anyway. We're done with the Nixon stuff. I deviated here. I got here specifically because we were having a conversation about Germans and how in modern Germany, for numerous reasons, and I've talked about this before a million times over at this point, for a lot of self-serving reasons, modern Germans are unconditional dick riders of the state of Israel. Some of the reasons for that are, of course, the collective guilt of the Holocaust. But I think that the real reason, the real nefarious reason, is that there's a lot of Islamophobia in Germany, and a lot of people spiritually, holistically, I think, in Germany, see Israel and a defense of Israel and the collective, antiquated, ancient, epigenetic anti-Semitism of the Arabs that they believe and repeatedly reinforce as a way to kind of move the attention away from the unimaginable wrongs that the German state dished out against Jews during the Holocaust. It's a way to really sidestep the Holocaust, to be like, no, you know who's the real anti-Semites actually? The Arabs, the Muslims. I think that's what it is. That's a major reason for why they are such unconditional dick riders for Israel. It's great. It's great for them. Because now they're like, you know who the real anti-Semites are now? Arabs, Muslims, you know?
Just a few months, which is unprecedented, ordering Israel the first time not to do anything which could constitute acts of genocide against the people of Gaza, the Palestinians.
Yeah, it's not just in Germany. This is an attitude across Europe, 100%. And this is not an attitude across Europe for like all working class individuals in Europe. It's just like the elites in Europe have this kind of attitude. Academics, those in positions of power, capitalists across the board, oftentimes love transferring the guilt of like collective anti-Semitism in the form of pogroms from every single fucking European country, and Russia as well, Tsarist Russia, and transferring that collective anti-Semitic actions and all of the guilt that they feel about their historical anti-Semitism, transfer that over to the Arabs and the Muslims in general.
The second time, it has ordered Israel to ensure that there is full humanitarian access. And now, almost unprecedentedly, it has ordered a state claiming to be in the middle of a self-defense operation to halt a major element of that campaign, its Rafah offensive.
Okay. So let's pick up the two. You mentioned there two previous rulings there. Nothing that constitutes genocide and full humanitarian access. Today's ruling required Israel to provide verification or to allow verification of humanitarian access, which seems to indicate that the court does not believe that Israel has complied with its earlier ruling.
Well, it certainly hasn't complied in the sense that the court has found that the situation has gotten much worse. And therefore, very unusually, it has made yet a further ruling in this case. And the court is very, very concerned about the future of those individuals who were sent to Rafah as a safe place by Israel to escape the consequences of the fighting, and who are now being displaced from there without adequate measures have been taken to ensure their survival in other places. And the court has noticed that no such adequate steps have been taken.
OK, so there we have a problem, don't we? Because the court rules do something about humanitarian access. The court rules today against Israel and says, stop what's going on in Rafah and let us check that you've complied with our earlier ruling. We heard yesterday from an Israeli government spokesman who was quoted as saying, no power on earth will stop Israel from protecting its citizens and going after Hamas in Gaza. The court can rule until it's blue in the face. Where's its or else?
Well, how many legions does the Pope have, as was famously asked? The court doesn't have an army to enforce its wishes. It could have an army if the UN Security Council were able to exercise its role, because the UN Security Council has, in principle, the power to enforce judgments of the court. But of course, with the US veto, that is not possible. And therefore, it is the very, very significant diplomatic pressure. You saw the indictments by the International Criminal Court in relation to Mr. Netanyahu.
A completely separate court, we should say.
And those have been backed up now yet again, in addition to their individual responsibility, by these actions directed towards the state of Israel. And it really makes the diplomatic space for Israel much, much more difficult to maneuver in. Israel has been arguing, we have been a model of humanitarian law compliance. But with all of this evidence, those arguments ring increasingly hollow, as most people who watch television, of course, already know.
Okay.
But once you have these authoritative findings from the highest judicial bodies in the world, it is much more difficult for Israel to maintain its position that it is, in a modest way, defending itself.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it's a wildly long trip to take to arrive at the conclusion that you could arrive at by watching like one video from a Palestinian person. Okay. And before you say, yeah, they're biased, it's like, I don't even mean that. Like, just like look at Gaza. Okay. That's it. That was the reality that even Western journalists that were onboarded with the IDF when they took trips into Gaza, that was the fucking reality that they met on the ground. That's it. It's not just the International Court of Justice or the ICC or all of these other fucking organizations being like, well, Israel, you're really fucking, expending all the political capital and good nature that you had. What's happening here? Like, nah, just look at anything. Just look at Gaza. Just look at it. And to be fair, looking at Gaza, even from afar, from Israeli territory, was declared so unconscionable that the Israeli government actually moved to take down the Associated Press feed of Gaza. Why? Well, for the crime of actually Al Jazeera, which they had already shut down inside of Israel because they're the most moral nation on the planet, remember. Al Jazeera was using the Associated Press live feed.
Does this ruling impose any duties or obligations on any other signatories to the court to do or not do anything? I'm thinking of the United States, amongst others, who it could be argued are supplying Israel with the wherewithal to carry out the activities that the court has now prohibited.
Funny you should say that, as, of course, you are hinting at. Germany is at present subject to a case in the International Court of Justice, where Nicaragua has argued that the continued provision of arms by Germany to Israel violates the Genocide Convention. And for a state like Germany, which prides itself as a model of compliance with international law, on the one hand, but which also wants to remain a very strong friend of Israel, that is a real huge dilemma coming up for it. The United States will not likely consider the court in relation to its arms exports, which are, of course, quite massive. The United Kingdom may be in a different position because under its ministry...
The only thing Germany loves more than defending Israel is following rules. That's what we're seeing here. Yes. that is a major downfall for those who want to unconditionally support Israel, because if the ICJ or the ICC rules against Israel, Germans have to follow those rules and follow those orders. There's just nothing. They have to. Like, you could solve this entire problem if you made a rule in Germany somehow that, it is that it's illegal to say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Tomorrow they would be like, okay, I've decided it is no longer the case.
Ministerial code, it cannot license the export of weapons if these weapons are likely to...
Could one say that Germans are driven by an ancient desire to follow rules? Yes. The Barbarin put up a phenomenal fight against the Roman Empire at the time. All the Romans had to do was say, this is against the rules. You have to be a part of us now. Okay? They were living in mud huts following rules. Epigenetic memories of rule abiding come from the ancient Germanic tradition. I love the rules. I have to follow the rules. Yeah. There's nothing else
to be used.
Remember, during the Nuremberg, one of the defenses launched by Nazis, we were just following the rules. Very anti-German to declare that to not be appropriate. Very anti-German for the court to say, well, sorry, that doesn't work in this situation.
Against international law, or certainly in favor of a campaign of genocide. These various pronouncements, again, make the space to maneuver for Israel and for its allies significantly smaller. Doesn't end the conflict, but it is another piece in the mosaic which will help, I think, persuade.
If Germans love the law, why aren't they speaking out against the crimes that Israel's already committing in violation of international law? This doesn't make much sense. Are you kidding me? It's because it's illegal to criticize Israel in the state of Germany. That's why there's a rule against it. Like, literally. Because they already put a rule. They're arresting, dude, Aryan-looking motherfuckers are arresting Jewish Germans for the crime of anti-Semitism as we speak. Okay? Without a hint of irony.
Israel ultimately to try not to isolate itself entirely from the international community.
And just a final word on genocide, because today's ruling is a part of a broader lawsuit brought by South Africa last year accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. Just explain to us briefly what impact today's decision has on that.
Well, this is part of that case. It is the third interim action by the court to protect the people of Palestine during the many years it will take the court to give the actual ruling as to whether or not genocide has taken place. So this action does not actually prejudice the finding of the court at the end of that lengthy period of legal argument as to whether or not genocide occurred. Remember the Bosnian case, where most thought we were faced with a significant campaign of genocide. And after many years of deliberation, the court found that Srebrenica was genocide, but the rest of this dreadful campaign of crimes against humanity didn't quite measure up to that high legal standard.
That's very clear, Professor. Thank you so much for walking us through that. Professor Mark Weller from the University of Cambridge.
We have team coverage of today's ruling from Israel and South Africa. I'm joined by our correspondent, Aya Ibrahim. She's in Jerusalem. And Diane Hawker, who's in Johannesburg. To both of you, welcome. Aya, let me start with you. Have we seen or heard any reaction from the Israeli government?
We've heard sort of individual reactions from members of government and the opposition. So let me just walk you through what we've heard so far. We've heard from Benny Gantz. He's a minister in the war cabinet. And after the ruling was issued, he said that Israel would continue its, quote, just and necessary war against Hamas to return its hostages. And he said that his country is committed to fighting for the hostages, for their return, and the security of its citizens anywhere. And that includes Rafah. So that gives you a hint into the kind of discussions that may be happening in the war.
You don't understand. You don't understand. Israel has to kill Palestinian children, or else Israel's future is terrifying. Earthquake? No, I'm just moving my leg a lot because I have to pee.
Cabinet right now, there's still that commitment and focus on Rafah. We've also heard from Bezalel Smotrich, that's the far-right finance minister in Israel, who said that Israel, I'm paraphrasing now, Israel stopping the fight in Rafah, or the fight for Rafah, is the equivalent of Israel sort of forfeiting its right to exist. And so there's a definite sign from the far right that they would reject this ruling, but that's unsurprising. We've also heard from Yair Lapid that he's the leader of the opposition and normally a fierce critic of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He also rejected the ruling and said that the ICJ did not make a connection, or perhaps strong enough of a connection, between the release of the hostages and the stopping of the fighting. That is not wholly accurate, because Judge Salam today, as he announced that ruling, did of course talk about how disturbing it is that Hamas still holds hostages and called for their release. We haven't heard from senior members like the Prime Minister or the President yet, but we can expect to hear from them soon. And it will be something along these lines that we've just heard. And you can also expect even harsher criticism as the Prime Minister. It's sort of become a habit whenever Israel faces this challenge from international institution, accusations of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel propaganda sort of are the first thing that the Prime Minister comes back with. We haven't heard that yet, but that's very, very probable.
All right, Diane, let me take...
I love that they already know. It's so predictable. It's such a fucking... Israel's such a one-trick pony that everyone's like, they're just going to say that it's anti-Semitic. I'm pre-watching it, and I'm telling you, it's very likely that they're going to say Israel has a right to defend itself. If Israel doesn't kill a shit ton of babies and shit ton of children, then it can't defend itself sufficiently. And also that anyone who says killing all of these children is bad is actually anti-Semitic.
This to you. We spoke with a legal scholar earlier today who said that this ruling was definitely a clear-cut win for South Africa. What have the reactions been there?
Well, the South African government is definitely taking it as a win. We heard from the Department of International Relations earlier on. They put out a video statement from the Director General there saying that this was a groundbreaking ruling. And he's essentially saying that South Africa intends to continue with this process that they've currently started. They will also go to the United Nations Security Council now that this ruling has been made, and look to the Security Council to take some steps that in a way bolster that ruling. Zain Dango also saying that although the ICJ didn't use the word ceasefire, that the effect of what they have called for is a de facto ceasefire, which is something that South Africa has been calling for several months now. So definitely seen from the South African government perspective as a win for their cause, and also an opportunity to continue to collect additional information for their case going forward.
DW's Diane Hawker in Johannesburg and DW's Aya Ibrahim in Jerusalem. To both of you, thank you. I'm joined now by Michael Becker. He's Assistant Professor of International Human Rights Law at Trinity College in Dublin. He is also a former legal advisor at the International Court of Justice. It's good to have you with us, Mr. Becker. Let me just ask you, is this an outright victory for South Africa that brought this case to the court?
Well, it's certainly the case that South Africa received just about everything that it requested from the court this time around. We know that South Africa has gone to the ICJ multiple times seeking provisional measures, this kind of urgent interim relief, and has asked each time for the court to order Israel to suspend the military operations. Up until this point, the court declined to take that step, to go that far. And so the fact that the court has now intervened in this way, ordering Israel to suspend military operations at least in the Rafah part of Gaza, is a pretty extraordinary development for South Africa. And it's also pretty extraordinary, I would add, that the court has ordered Israel to allow unimpeded access to UN fact-finding bodies or commissions of inquiry. This is also something that parties in multiple cases have requested before, and the court has always been very reluctant to order. So that also suggests an extremely high degree of concern on the part of the court.
How much then of a defeat is this for Israel?
Well, it certainly adds to the list of defeats that I think Israel has experienced in this case along the way. Israel all along has urged the court not to take this step, making the argument that this would leave Israel unable to defend itself when it's involved in an ongoing conflict.
Totally.
But this really means that the court has found that there is simply no other way at this point to preserve the rights at issue in this case, the rights of the Palestinian population in Gaza, not to be subject to acts that might meet the legal definition of genocide. I do think that the court, the order just came out. Haven't had a chance to completely comb through it in detail, but as far as I can tell, the court didn't say anything about what this leads.
It's odd. It's odd, but the reality of the matter is, all Israel had to do after October 7 was not go as gung-ho on the entire Palestinian population. All they needed to do, if they wanted to maintain their apartheid, if they wanted to keep it going, all they had to do was just not fucking react this way. Not react the way that they did. And the rest of the world would 100%, 1000% would have went along with it, as they have done. As they've done so, turned a blind eye to the apartheid. As they've done so. But nope, they had to go nutty mode. They had to get their freak on. They just could not contain their anger and resentment and just behave in the way that they have. I think it is the arrogance that was firmly planted by 75 years of negligence from the Western world that caused them to think like, oh no, we can just do literally whatever the fuck we want, and the rest of the world will have our backs in the same way, and if they don't, then fuck them. They're anti-Semitic. Crazy. And reinforcing that behavior, which Joe Biden did with his bear hug, was probably another, like, one of the worst things you could have done. Like, going to Israel and being like, nope, you have the go ahead, no red lines, I'm giving you a fucking symbolic bear hug. Absolutely awful. The minute October 7 happened, the whole world knew what was going to follow. You said as well, October 8, they would go crazy. Yeah. And some people who knew what was going to happen literally were like, well, the Palestinians brought this upon themselves. Immediately running to attribute the fault of what they knew was going to happen back to the Palestinians. the entirety of the Palestinian population.
Leaves Israel with the ability to do. But I think it can't really be construed to mean that Israel is no longer allowed to defend itself if Israel suffers.
There was a fucking red line, though. Are we all just getting transitive Alzheimer's from Joe Biden? No. 9 days after October 7, Joe Biden went to Israel and said there are no red lines. The red line that you're talking about is Rafah. The recent red line that you're talking about was about Rafah, which Israel has violated, by the way, very openly. And it doesn't even fucking matter because it's obvious that if Biden is just like consistently redrawing that red line conveniently around the boundaries of wherever the Israeli occupying force is. He said he set a red line, but it was lip service, as evidenced by the fact that Israel violated that red line very quickly and said, "Nah, we're going to go into Rafah, fuck you," and is currently in Rafah. And yet, all that came from that was a partial suspension of weapons delivery. Meanwhile, Blinken literally said there are no red lines, reiterated that. And as you can see with your eyes, like, it doesn't really matter. There is no real red line.
Future attacks. So if Hamas, for example, were to abuse what the court has ordered here by using Rafah as a staging area to launch rocket attacks,